One of the biggest concerns that I hear from parents is, well, our kids shouldn't see that we're not in agreement. And I disagree with that. I think that our kids just need to see, one, that you're in disagreement, and then that you solve that disagreement later. We just have to help our kids make sense of the world. We have to help them make sense of what they're seeing so they don't think, oh, all parents fight. Welcome back for part 2 of our Partner Not On Board episode. Now, in case you missed the last episode, last week, we started a conversation about parenting when your partner is not on the same page. And we went so deep and we got into such a flow that we actually decided to break the episode into 2 parts. So if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, be sure to stop this and go listen to that episode first. For everyone else, welcome back. And let's continue where we left off. So we're going to start with the you piece, which the biggest one I think of here for the you piece, especially when you're first getting started with that frustration and that resentment and that anger towards a partner, is starting with yourself and your own interpretation of their behaviors, your own thoughts about why they're doing what they're doing. Can you kind of talk a little bit to that and some of the big thought swaps that are really helpful right here?
Sure. The number one thing that the partner who's listening to this episode that does not have the spouse on board or the partner on board need to know is that it's not about you, right? Do not take their behavior personally.
That's such a good one. That whole Carly Simon concept of it's not about you. Because when you were researching turtles versus researching how to help Elijah, I took it personally as you don't care about me. You don't care about Elijah. You don't care about our family. You just care about turtles. I made it really personal. So I hear how that could be super helpful.
I can only hear how ludicrous it sounds for you to say all you care about is turtles. Now,
you had a t-shirt that says, I like turtles.
I know, because it's an amazing clip from like the early 2000s. I like turtles. Okay, so turtles aside, no, back to the turtles for a second. Okay. Now, like in my perspective, I feel like we're painting the picture that like turtle is like this really big part of our life and it's like a wedge between us, but which is really funny to me. But the reality is there was a problem that needed to be solved. And that problem was the tank for the turtle is too small. I need to figure out an appropriate size. Does the size fit in the space that we have available to us? What are the options? If we get that, what is the best filtration system? Does it have to be this or that or this, right? Like,
okay, you're jumping the gun. You're helping them understand what the problem is.
I'm just like giving the opposite perspective because you're all making it personal. And over here, I'm just trying to solve the problem of the turtles. Yes. Now, the most important part to that piece was the reality is I don't know anything about parenting, right? So what was the face you just made?
I don't know.
Like, oh my God, he let the cat out of the bag.
No, I know, but no, you didn't know anything about turtles either. That was my hardest. That was the thing that was so hard for me is you would say, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know how to parent. Well, and I would go, but you don't know about turtles either, and you're learning about turtles.
Exactly. So one of us was learning about parenting, you, and one of us was learning about turtles, me. And together, we were rocking and rolling.
We were not rocking and rolling at this stage at all.
I'm just telling you what the narrative in my brain was.
I will tell you, though, now that we are far more connected and we are way more down the path, I kind of want to jump to the understand piece, too, because I understand that you only do things that you can be successful at.
True.
You're getting better at trying new things, but you have never failed because you don't do things that you can't fail at. And so here was this huge problem you just said in front of you. And here was this other seemingly huge problem about a turtle. And you could solve the turtle one. It was a manageable hill. It was a manageable challenge. It was very logical. It was from point A to point B. And with parenting, that's not how it works. And I think so often you're actually dealing with that exact dynamic with families, with one partner who's incredibly logical, linear, wants to be able to tick a box, wants to be able to open up the instruction manual and go step by step by step and it work out beautifully. And then you've got the other one who is maybe more emotional, more heartfelt, more empathetic, wanting to create a relationship. And sometimes they are like oil and water and, they just don't mix.
What I remember very vividly is you getting very upset that I wanted to watch the DVD that came with the blender.
I do remember that.
Okay, so I didn't know you were going to laugh.
I totally forgot about that, but that was pre-parenting squabbles.
Okay, so my point being is that we are two very different humans, right? And there are things that I do that are ludicrous to you, and there are things that you do that are ludicrous to me.
No, I am absolutely perfect.
I know, right. But all jokes aside, there are so many things that are happening underneath the surface that are like, my way is the best way there possibly could be, right? Because we're zoomed in on our life and we're zoomed in on our feelings and we're really holding on to those, like our personality and our ego, I think is the word I'm really going for, that anything that isn't in our sphere is crazy, right? There's that I think it's George Carlin joke. It's right. Anybody who's driving faster than you is crazy, and anybody who's driving slower than you is an idiot, right? And it's the same sort of concept across.
I don't know if that's like an appropriate joke anymore.
It's George Carlin. I mean, it's from whenever. The 80s,
so it's definitely not
70s.
Appropriate anymore.
But it's funny and it's true. Like, if you're driving down the road and you're going 80 and then somebody zooms past you, you're like, well, that guy is freaking crazy. What's he doing?
I just don't know that we should be calling people crazy or idiots. Like, I think I'm struggling. See, here we go. I think I'm really struggling with the fact that, like,
I agree.
As calm the chaos, I don't know that we believe
But
I don't know that we believe in, like, labeling people as crazy or as idiots. Like, and so then we're going to say that on an episode.
I'm not worried about that at all.
I know. I am. I got all heebie-jeebie on the inside and I didn't like it.
Okay.
But this is a really good example of if this was a parenting issue and I'm getting all heebie-jeebie on the inside because something's in a misalignment.
Well,
and then you're not, because it's like going over your head. You're like, what the heck? That doesn't even matter. And in the moment right now, while we're having a conversation and we've got thousands of listeners, is not the time for us to have this conversation of, like, instead it is the time, except for that it's going to take a while because I want to understand where you're coming from and I want to get to the bottom of why I feel this way. And I want to make sure that our values align. And I'm talking more about the parenting issue right now, but I'm also talking about this because we believe in differences and all of those things and embracing all people and being respectful of people and what they want and need to feel successful in this world. And so there is this core value that's shaking things up inside of me when you said that. And the only reason I'm going so deep on this is because this is that feeling when I'm in a fight with you, which doesn't happen very often, but like, if there's a parenting situation and you're reacting a certain way, and then I'm starting to be like, oh, no, you didn't. It's because there's like something on the inside of me getting all worked up. And the reason it's getting worked up is because it is pulling against what I believe and my background and my journey that I've been on and my perspective. And so in that moment, when I'm feeling all those feelings, is not probably the moment to say something right that moment. It's a moment after we're connected, after we have, I can be like, okay, this is not about me. He's on his own journey. right? And I'm going to stay calm. And then later we're going to connect and then I can share my kind of perspective and why it bothered me. And then you could share your perspective about why it didn't bother you. And together we could collaborate and come up with a future plan.
Sure. And I think what you're describing here is the connect piece of the puzzle, right? Like, how are we, like, in this moment, right? Like, we're obviously having this hilarious conversation where, you know, you're at odds with things that I'm saying, and I'm like, yeah, none of that matters. It's all up to your perception. And it's like, it's maybe inappropriate here to have like a weird spouse disagreement, business partner disagreement, whatever is happening. I don't know. And it's like, okay, we both agree that it's time to move on for the sake of like the goal. The connection piece here is the important part, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I don't actually think we're going to dissect this later, right? Like, I mean,
there might be like a sentence or two later. This isn't the same thing as like, you know, you're spanking the kids and I don't believe in spanking, or you're taking away their electronics when I don't think that that's the right move.
What I'm saying is, like, I don't think this example serves the purpose of exemplifying the connection piece. So what I would love to do is take it back to when, you know, we are at our worst. You know, it's the hardest days. There's multiple multi-hour meltdowns happening.
Yeah.
You know, what was our connection plan then?
Well, I think a lot of people think that when we say it's time to connect, they think of, oh, we should go on date nights, or we should hang out after the kids go to bed, or we should go on walks together. We should plan a trip together. And the truth is when you're in a really bad place with your partner, none of those things are going to be possible. We didn't celebrate our birthdays for a few years because we were in a really bad place. We definitely didn't have date nights without the kids. By the time the kids went to bed, I was so exhausted. I was plopping down right there with them. Or we were fighting to get the kids to bed, you know? And so we didn't really have that extra time. So connection really had to be two things. One, it had to be really small gestures. So it had to be this, like, I'm going to hold your hand while we're sitting on the couch while our kids are playing, or I'm going to sit on the same side of the couch as you instead of across the room. I'm going to put my phone away while you're in the same room with me. I'm going to connect with you as a human, the human I fell in love with, the human that I married, the human that I saw so much in. I'm going to connect with that person before I ever attempt to connect with the parent, because that's the hat that we put on this like parent hat. And then when we connect, it's like, oh, let's talk about the kids. Oh, let's talk about that thing that happened. Oh, let's talk about what we're going to do for dinner tonight. And that's not really connection. That's being parenting partners, but you have to connect on more of a soul level. You have to, you really have to get back to, what do you like? What are you doing? Like, want to play a game with me while the kids are playing with me? Want to sit on my side of the table while the kids sit on that side of the table? Like, it is really, want to cook together, right? Like, it's really, really small gestures, and they have to happen before you can start having any sort of conversation where you two don't see eye to eye. Now, we're super connected. So even the little pretend argument we just had, there was
I'm seething on the inside.
But it doesn't have to be both people, right? Like most arguments happen because one person is super hurt and then goes after the other person. The other person feels like they're being attacked. So then they put up their defenses and then they attack back, but they were never upset to begin with. And so I think, you know, if we were not connected, we couldn't have even made it through that silliness that just happened. I would have been like, that's stupid. Why are we recording this episode? We should just stop now. This is the worst episode in the world, and we can't even get through an episode without us disagreeing. But that's not where we went. And that is where I believe I went for a long time, is like, what's the point? Why are we doing this? We can't even go to the store together. We can't even play a game together, eat dinner together. We can't even get through one day without a fight over how we're supposed to handle something. And I think that's the other thought swap that I would focus on, is that all or nothing. Like, we can't. It's terrible. It's awful. What's the point? And instead start focusing on those teeny tiny, like, wait a second. I do like this guy. Oh, he did help us with the turtle.
Turtle guy.
The turtle's got the best tank in the world now. Or we talked about in another episode, this, like, you called it like a psychological hack, where I encouraged Elijah to connect with you, and we were like jotting down those positive interactions. But I think it was just as much for me as it was for you two, because I needed to prove to myself that you guys had a relationship and that you actually liked me and that you liked my kids and that you wanted to be a part and you wanted to be here, because my trauma background believed that you were going to abandon me just like everybody else. And so I had to find proof that you were going to stick around.
Is this why you're worried that if we have too long of a podcast, you think that the listeners will abandon us?
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
I'm just saying.
Maybe. Well, I think I just want to be the most helpful.
Let's back it up for a second. Right?
Okay.
You had talked about how, you sort of were like, it's all or nothing. You're not seeing the good in the other person, right? And this really hits home this idea of how human brains work, right? We tend to work in generalizations, right? Deletions and distortions, right? And those are the things that kind of hold us back. Mm-hmm. So when you can sort of really get clear, like set aside some of the emotions, right? Like have that moment, have that grounding moment, and find the clarity, right? What here is true, right? Are you always disconnected, or are there small moments, right? Like you're just looking for the actual factual truth, not the distortions, not the deletions, right? And when you had us focus on the wins, Elijah and I, we weren't able to delete all the small moments that we had.
Yeah.
Right. And so we were focusing on what was actually happening, not all of the being a human.
Well, and not just the painful parts that your brain remembers so that you will avoid it in the future.
Right. You're trying to stay safe emotionally, physically, all of that.
Right. So we've kind of gone roundabout with the UQ framework. And there's one other piece, but I want to dig into the understand just a little bit more. So just to kind of recap where we're at so far, we've got you. We're going to do that with thought swaps by really saying this is not about me. We're going to depersonalize it. We're going to say they're on their own journey. We're going to say remind ourselves that it's not all or nothing, any of those sorts of things. Then the connection's going to happen as much out of the moment as possible with those tiny interactions by connecting with the human, not with the parent that you have in front of you. And there's an exercise I love that I'll have parents do sometimes, is to just list out 50 things they love about their partner. And to really just focus on those 50 things. What are 50 things? And you can take as much time as you need to do that. But focusing on those is really powerful, because when I ask them to write a list of the things you don't like about your partner, they can list 150.
They just have a scroll.
They just have a scroll, and it just goes on and on and on about all the things their partner's doing wrong. And then when I ask them, what do you like about your partner? Why are you married to your partner? They have to soul search. And I was there at one point, and I believe there's probably parts of you that had to do that at one point too. And so, that's a really good place to start here. Even if you don't feel at a place where you can do those tiny pieces of connection, you can do the connection with your own heart and just be like, okay, what do I want to remember about my partner that I love about my partner? And soon that will start to grow into, oh, my partner is doing these things because my partner is a provider, and that's what I love about my partner. But you can't get there right at the beginning.
Yeah, and I will say that if that is a struggle for you, write one down.
Yeah.
And focus on that one thing.
Yeah.
right? Because what you focus on grows.
Yeah. So the understand piece, we've talked a lot about this, is really getting to the bottom of the other person's perspective. And again, you can't do that in the heat of the moment if you're in an argument. You're really doing a lot of what we're talking about is about getting ahead of the moment. And but we've shared some like in the moment strategies as well. But this is really about getting your partner's perspective, understanding their goals, understanding their background, getting curious about their behavior patterns, about their upbringing, about their belief system, about their values, because I guarantee you the things they're doing are related to some of those things. And also, we talked about in the last episode that unique profile about understanding each person in the family, really diving into what calms your partner, what are their sensory preferences, what are their warning signs that they're getting triggered, what are their triggers, like what are some things that just automatically set them off. And knowing so much about your partner will help you connect later. It will help you problem solve. It'll help you build communication. And so this is a lot of you doing a lot of this work, even if you can't communicate with your partner yet. And then when you can communicate, it's asking a ton of questions when you're out of the moment. And it doesn't have to be, berating them with 100 questions. It could be one question today and a question in a week. It could take time, and that's okay. And it could be something like, I notice when the kids won't get off their electronics, you get really frustrated. And I'm trying to figure out where that frustration is coming from. Can you tell me a little bit about why it frustrates you so much that they won't get off, or what you're worried about if they continue doing electronics, or if we can't get ahead of this? Like, where is this coming from? Can you tell me more? So using scripts like that can really help the communication and the conversation to understand. Would you add anything else to the understand piece?
Well, more of an advanced maneuver, right? But really understanding kind of where they came from, what their environment was, like what they sort of downloaded from their parents growing up can really provide some key insights into that person's like fears, worries, and triggers, and any like lurking trauma that's underneath the surface.
How would you go about doing that?
Well, I mean, I think that is having a conversation with your partner about what it was like growing up, in their family.
I think you still learn things because I had a very interesting past, but I feel like you still are learning things about my history.
And, some of it's hard because a lot of the times your body and your brain are very good at hiding away things that you don't want to bring back up, right? And that's a whole other topic for me. But like that ability to be able to be open and talk is a journey in and of itself. So it may not be, again, like the best topic, but it's... There could be landmines.
I think I've got an example. So a big trigger for a lot of parents is either A, being talked over, or B, not being listened to. Like just being ignored, feeling like they're being ignored.
Well,
right?
You do that to me all the time.
Right. I do, because I have an ADHD brain, so those things do happen. But what I'm talking about is even specifically with kids. So when a child, talks back to you, or when a child doesn't do what you've asked them to do, a lot of times parents will get triggered because the kid's not listening to them. And so then they will react because their kid's not doing this. And so what you're saying is there is this underlying way that they were raised. And you could ask a question like, can you tell me about growing up? Did you ever feel did you feel heard? Did you feel ignored? Did you feel like you were listened to? Did you ever feel like people were judging you? Like, what happened when you talked back? What happened when you didn't agree with your parents?
Yeah, absolutely.
So and I know, we can talk about the differences between, having two different, neurodivergent adults parenting in a whole nother episode. But yeah, what what you're saying here is if you really can remove the emotion and start to be like, wait a second, why are they reacting like that? Okay, maybe I can start asking some questions. And a lot of times they won't even know that that's why they're doing it, but it requires the dialogue to get behind it.
Well, sure. And, in the example that you're talking about, right, the kid is not doing the thing you asked, or they're not communicating in the way you'd like, right? If you're getting triggered by it, right, like that means like that anger or that fear or that anxiety is inside of you and you're getting squeezed, and then out comes that fear. But like it's a lack of understanding, or maybe even a lack of empathy around that situation. And then if you back out into the parenting perspective, it's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Because if you can understand why your partner is getting so stressed or so reactive over certain things, then you can have more empathy, and then you can have an open conversation and get curious about what's going on under the surface. Now, those are harder to do, especially in the days if you guys are really disconnected. Those conversations aren't going to happen because they're not going to feel emotionally safe to let the cat out of the bag, so to speak.
So I think that's what brings us to the empower piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because when you're in a really rough place, and if you say something and it sets off your partner, or if you go to try to even help your partner and then they get all reared up like this angry bear, that definitely happened multiple times.
That was like a scared orangutan or something. It certainly wasn't a bear.
Okay. Anyway, so if you go to help your partner and you're like, I think you should walk away, that is going to trigger them. Almost always, it's going to set the partner off because they're going to feel like they are being, I don't think this is the right word, emasculated.
Yeah.
Is that the right word?
You nailed it.
Did I?
I was thinking scraggly mongoose, but you went with emasculated.
They're just going to feel like all their power got taken away, right? And it definitely isn't about power in the moment, but sometimes in the moment it feels like it. And so if you're thinking, okay, I've got this, I'm doing this thing, even if it's wrong, and someone else comes in and is like, out you go, you're going to be frustrated with that. Unless you have a plan. So one of the first plans we ever created, and I'm talking like when things were really, really bad, we created out of the moment, we created a tap out plan.
Soggy waffles.
Is that what it was?
It's what it always is in my head.
We did have a tap out plan, and it took a while to perfect it because there still was that reaction of, no, I'm good. No, I've got this.
Physical safety involved sometimes.
Physical safety. And he would try to tap me out because he would be worried that I was not safe or that I couldn't, because you can only stay calm for so long. And so he would be like, you've been at this for a while, like whatever. And I'd be like, no, I've got it. And sometimes we'd fight over if I had it or not, and it's like, this is not helping. And so that is why doing this plan out of the moment is so important, because you can discuss, okay, how will we know it's time? What are the signs in the family, in the environment, and what are the signs on our own body that maybe we can't see, but the other person can? So at this point, he'll kind of notice, what are some of the signs you notice when you tap me out still? Because we still do this.
Well, one, you're yelling.
Yeah, my voice gets loud, really loud.
Well, your like fight kicks in, right? That's your like primary stress response, and where that's not my stress response. And usually yelling is not helpful to anyone, right? You're just adding more chaos into the machine, so to speak. That's usually the
You're
biggest
making
one.
a thump on that. Is that a problem? Like for the microphone? No, here I go, interrupting him again. But guys, he's thumping the ball that he's sitting on. I almost said you're thumping your balls.
You were doing so good.
I know, but you were thumping. Is the thumping okay?
I'm sure it's fine.
Okay, all right, keep going. So I go into fight, flight, or freeze. I go into fight. Yelling's not helpful for anyone.
So the other signs, I mean, really, it's that we're also at a point now where you are quite good at approaching situations from a place of self-leadership. You have a lot more patience with the kids than I do when it comes to like large emotions, right? So for me, it is, if I had to put myself back into it, it was, hey, you've been at this for a long time. It was, hey, you're losing your cool, or if I was in a particularly good place and I had enough like gas in the tank to step in, I would, or I'd ask.
Let me take it for a moment.
Yeah. So that you could go take some deep breaths and come back.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking like even the other day, like you would say, hey, hun, you're doing that thing where you kind of slip into telling, right? It was something like that. Like I was telling them what to do, or I was like, I don't remember what it was. Like sometimes one of my things when I get nervous or worried or like excited about a thing coming up, I do slip into I think you call it like you're slipping into your mom mode, right? Because I slip back and I say things that my mom said growing up.
Spousal tip. Don't tell your wife that they're acting like their mother.
Yeah, don't do that. But I now know that he means it from a good place. And so I just like take my deep breath and I'm like, okay, like I'm obviously stressed or nervous.
We're at a place where I can say that to you.
Yeah.
And you understand what I'm saying. You're literally just replaying a program that you downloaded as a child. Now, those times are interesting because we have a dynamic in our household that is inclusive. It is collaborative. And there are times where I would say that you lose your ever-loving mind and then you start telling people how it's going to be and what they need to do and how they need to act when we get there and what they need to wear before we get there.
And by lose my ever-loving mind, he doesn't mean that I'm yelling. Like I literally am like, okay, we're going out to eat with Granddude. So we're going to wear nice clothes and we're going to sit at the table and we're not going to use any of our supports that we know help us. So we're not going to take our headphones. We're not going to be on electronics while we're there. And I'm taking away all the supports that I know help my kids thrive in the world. And just because I'm worried or I have fear of what everyone's going to think.
Absolutely.
Because I'm human. And so those things come out. And in the other side is true as well, where, there are still times where you get really edgy. Your voice gets a little sterner. You get a little like snippy. And like you just said, you don't have as much patience. And I have the understanding now to know that a lot of that is how your brain is wired. And it is really hard for you to be around really big emotions. It is hard for you to be around someone crying or yelling or upset or whining or any of that, because one, the sound alone just probably sounds like chalkboard sounds or something to you, but it really bothers you just when the noise level goes up because a child's upset or because I'm upset. And so I know that enough about you. And so we still use our tap out plan for that even. And I'll say, if you're having a hard time remaining calm, I can do this. I have enough patience. And there are some times where I go, I have no patience left. And so if this is going to work, I need to walk away. There are times that I say that sometimes. And then you take over. And so the importance here is that it's at all different stages that you do this tap out plan. But when you're first starting, there's almost no talking. At the beginning, it really was like deciding, are we going to say a code word? Am I going to touch your shoulder? What am I going to do? And one of the biggest concerns that I hear from parents is, well, our kids shouldn't see that we're not in agreement. And I disagree with that. I think that our kids just need to see you're in disagreement and then that you solve that disagreement later. We just have to help our kids make sense of the world. We have to help them make sense of what they're seeing so they don't think, oh, all parents fight, right? And if you have a tap out system that's working, they're not going to see you fighting. They might see, oh, they work together and they tap out. And our kids do this now. I've noticed, like when there's a really big problem, like even just like a sick kid, like they pop out of nowhere and they're like, I'm in to help. And then one goes away and the other one goes upstairs, comes in, and there's kind of implementing a tap out system without us ever talking about it because they've watched us tap out.
we've jumped through a couple of hoops and come back and gone through the hoops again. But I think we're painting a pretty good picture of the dynamics in our household, how we utilize the UQ framework in everyday situations, how we've navigated it over the years, how it's changed over the years. Yeah. Because it is a very dynamic framework. It's a dynamic process. It grows with you, right? We have this idea of like the lighthouse, and like you're kind of going up the spiral staircase, right? And like you may still be in the U piece, but you're probably in a much different perspective as the time goes on, as you're more connected with your spouse and all the different stages.
You're going to use the UQ at every stage, which we've gone through in all the episodes. We go in depth in our book, in even more depth with coaching inside of our program. But it does, we have people who go back to the beginning stage over and over and over again because of the challenges you face. And every time you're at a different viewpoint, you can see more, you can receive more, you can understand more, you can empower more because you've practiced it, because you've done it, because you've implemented it, and you've made mistakes along the way and you've learned from them.
Yeah. Now, in our original, talking about what we were going to talk about in this episode, we sort of had this tiny next step of talking about the 2-minute hug, but I'd like to do an audible.
Okay.
Right. So
what do you think their next step should be?
I think the biggest thing that has connected us through the years and motivated us and driven us to the point that we're at now, right, where we grow together, we work together, even when we deviate, you joke sometimes hey, are you ever going to be too woo-woo for me, right? Is there ever going to be a day? Now, our lives would be very different if I was totally woo-woo and you were not, and we didn't grow together in that way, right? That would create a lot of dissonance between us. But the thing that has united us together on this path is our desire and our commitment to each other, right? And wanting to grow together, wanting to be the best individual people we are, the best parents that we can be, the best family unit we can be. And when that is our mutual goal, right? And we both agree and we both have that core value of hey, we want to make this work, that will help you weather the storm. That will be your North Star. Right. So if you are struggling with your spouse or your partner, and the biggest thing that's kind of holding back is your kid's behavior or finances or whatever the thing is, right, is can the two of you decide together that, you want the same thing, which is to be together, to grow together, right? To raise a family together.
And it doesn't mean you're going on the same path together.
No,
I think that's the important part is one of you might be going by plane and one of you might be still taking the train, right? Or cart and buggy. I don't think it matters. I think we get so hung up on traveling there, getting to our destination exactly the same way and being this united front, when the united front is where are we going and what's important to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And you talk about the unique profiles and making sure that everyone is seen, valued, and heard. Yeah. Right. Your idea of family connection, especially when it comes to extended family, is very different than mine. And if you chose to focus on, it has to look a certain way and you have to dress a certain way and it has to be a certain way, we will have a very disconnected relationship because we don't see eye to eye on that, right? And at the same time, if I got stuck on my way of things, you and I would be at odds because they're very different. So it's two sides.
So what can they do? Knowing that is one thing. Would you say just to start that conversation of can we make a commitment? Can we kind of recommit to ourselves? Can we commit towards relationship?
Maybe I think we're still geniuses because maybe it's let's not commit to something so big as
it's a big one.
Lifetime.
I was I don't know that they could do that.
Exactly. So what can you do? Can you commit to spending the next 2 minutes hugging each other?
And if they can't, can they write one thing that they like about their partner?
Sure, why not?
Yeah. I got an email this morning that said, my partner makes me want to throw up. And I wrote back and said, are you safe? that's always my go-to question, right? So number one, know if you are safe. And if not, please, there are lots of free resources out there for if you are stuck in a bad relation, like a really bad relationship. So, but I always feel like I have to just say that my heart goes out. So anyway, but for this one action step, if you're not a place where you can take a 2-minute hug, if you're not at a place where you can do a 1-minute hug, do that thing where we list out the things that we like about our partner and find one, just one reason you love your partner and you are committed to building the connection, to communicating, to listening, to hearing, because it may start one-sided. You may have to do the 100% right now. And then as you build that relationship, then they can do their 100%, you can do your 100%, and now you've got this beautiful relationship where you can weather anything.
Yeah. And, we've been talking for a while now, and we didn't even talk about, it's not 50-50, it's
right.
100-100, right?
Right.
Both of you need to come at it with 100%. Otherwise it doesn't work.
No. Yeah.
But at the same token, you can only control yourself. So you can lead by example, right? Like you can have the behavior that you desire, the end result that you desire, and you can start to transform, the environment that you're in.
We see it all the time. I mean, I did it. If I had waited for you, I don't know that we'd be there yet.
But we'd have one heck of a turtle tank.
We do have a beautiful turtle tank and an amazing turtle named Sandy. Yeah.
Okay. So
aside from turtles, any final words of wisdom?
So what I really like is, we had sort of brainstormed this idea of small hug. In the moment I talked about, when you really down deep at your core, know that your spouse or partner makes you a better person. That's who you want to be with. You can start to work through that. You mentioned, hey, maybe you're not in the place, right? Maybe pheromones have changed and you smell them and you want to puke. And then, you talked about that. You talked about maybe they're just I'm so frustrated that they repulse me right now. There's so many different caveats. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing, right? I'm not in a place to ever tell anyone else what to do exactly I'm not here to throw spaghetti at your life.
Nope.
I'm here to challenge your viewpoints, challenge the way you think about things, to think about things differently, and to provide you with a framework for that style of thought so that you can take your unique path, your unique journey, and find your way to where the life you love and the things that light you up.
Yeah, I love that so much. Just a reminder of this isn't a cookie cutter solution. We gave you some suggestions for each of the steps in the roadmap or each of the steps in the framework. You connect, understand, empower. You do need all four. We have found that time and time again. It doesn't matter what challenge you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with a partner who's building a turtle tank instead of helping you with the kids, or you're dealing with a neighbor who is throwing trash over your fence. It doesn't matter. You still need you connect, understand, empower, a little bit of each one, and you'll be able to build a beautiful relationship. And so with your partner, just remember, what can you do to change your perspective, to change your thoughts so that they are more empowering instead of disempowering? How can you connect with your partner so that you feel more in tune, more connected to the human you are married to or in a relationship with, raising this child with? And then how can you get to the bottom of why your partner is doing what they're doing and what's behind it and where's their perspective coming from, so you can really understand their ideas and their viewpoint from a different place. And then finally, how can you empower both of you to feel like you're moving forward, you're making progress together, and you're on the same team? That is really what we talked about today in 60 seconds or less. And, we went roundabout and around the pawpaw patch and back again. And here we are. And I hope that this extremely long episode has helped you really see that you can do this and see that there is hope that you can disagree, you can be on different paths and still end up at the same destination. And you don't have to have exactly the same parenting style as your partner, and you don't have to have an agreement about everything. And you can mess up and you can argue, and you're okay. And you're gonna get through this one baby step at a time. So that's just my big warm hug to everyone listening. And I think that wraps up this episode. Everything we've talked about, we go in depth in the framework and the roadmap inside of our book. And in future episodes, we're going to be diving into more of the most common questions we get. If you have a question you want us to address, then please leave a comment, tag me on social. We're at Calm the Chaos Parenting, and let us know what you want us to cover, because we really do want to help you be able to go from surviving to thriving as a family. And with that, I want to remind you, you have got this.